Welcome to Racket Stringing Tips. Today I wanted to get into the top 5 stringing tips related to equipment and tools. So I want to get right into it. I want to make this video short, but lots of value. Again, if you have any comments or suggestions or what's worked for you, any questions, please leave those in the comments as well. All right, so let's get right into it. So the first thing I would recommend is checking the calibration regularly on your machine, whether it's a constant pull electronic machine or whether it's a lockout crank type style machine. Basically what you want to do is you want to assure that when you're stringing the racket and you're stringing it at a certain tension, whatever that reference tension is that you set the machine to, that it's consistent every time you string. And the way that you do that is you check it by either using an electronic measuring tool such as what you can kind of see in the background picture here, or there's also non-electronic ones as well that you just put into your machine, and you can check the calibration easy. It just takes a few minutes. And I have done videos in the past on that. There's lots of videos available for you to see. As far as if you want more information on that, please leave that in the comments. But basically the idea here is I would recommend anytime you possibly move the machine from one location to another, or you're just moving it for a little while and then you're moving it back, any of those type situations, I would recommend rechecking the calibration to make sure nothing got jarred or moved around inside the machine, and so it's accurate as before. And then also figure out a system for yourself. You know, if you string 20 rackets a month, maybe that's a good measure for yourself. Okay, every month, at the beginning of the month, I'm just going to check the calibration. Or if you string 200 rackets a week or a month, then you might think, okay, well, every 200 rackets, maybe every week. This depends on how much volume that you do, but on a consistent basis, just check it so that you can be assured that things aren't changing and that the tension continues to be the same over time. Next thing, using the proper tools. So making sure that you use the correct awls when you're using tools to enlarge grommets or replace grommets, things of that nature. Use quality tools, and there's a number of different tools, right? And anything from starting clamps to awls to straightening the strings, to the clamps on the machine itself, to the right lubricants, all those kind of things. So make sure that you use the proper tools. And again, that's outside the scope of this video, but just to kind of keep in mind that that is one big thing that could keep you from the risk of damaging string or equipment as well. Tool maintenance. So this is, I think, the biggest thing here would be to keep all your tools clean, especially after you've been stringing for the day or whatever, or week. When you put everything back, keep any of the, sometimes strings have different materials on it that is then left on the clamps or anything that you use to string the rackets, and to kind of clean that off so that it doesn't build up and create problems later on. And this is especially true for the starting clamps, and then also your traditional clamps on your machines, to make sure that you clean those regularly, so that, especially if you string with like natural gut or some synthetics that have a lot of residue and things on it, and you want to make sure that the clamps are going to continue working properly and that they don't slip, because once they slip, that damages the string, and then you have to start over. And just the idea of using a starting clamp. Okay, this is a good stringing tool tip. I usually have 1 or 2 starting clamps available. The reason I would have 2 is because if I am stretching like natural gut or some of the multi-filament strings, if I'm stretching them by hand, I will use those, and I'll put a starting clamp on each side of this, each end of the string as I'm pulling it around what I'm pulling it around. So that's one thing. I use it sometimes to pull knots tight. I'll use them to start a string job. Sometimes if the string is too short, I will use it as a bridge. There's lots of different ways that a starting clamp can help you in your stringing process. And so I would definitely recommend having a starting clamp. Proper mounting. Okay, this is another good stringing tip related to your equipment. Making sure that the racket is properly mounted, whether it's 2-point mounting or whether it's 6-point mounting, making sure it's not too tight, because if it's too tight on there, it's so secure that when you start putting strings through there and tensioning them, it's creating pressure on the mounts, and then it could damage the racket because it just can't move out at all. And sometimes when you're done with the racket, you're having trouble loosening the mounting system, that could be a good indicator that you might be going too tight when you are initially mounting the racket, because the racket frame is going to move around a little bit. So you got to let it have a little bit of breathing room. Obviously, you want to have it pretty snug, but not so tight that later on you can't loosen the mounting. So that's what I would recommend on that, and making sure that the racket is actually straight. There's been times in the past, even with the 6-piece mounting, like I'm a little tiny bit off, and then I realize that once I start, I'm like, wait a minute, it's a little bit off, and you can tell really quick that's the case. So you want to make sure that, at 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock that it's right whether it's the dot or right in the middle. Once you've done enough rackets, you get the idea pretty quickly. So generally, looking at these 5 tips: regularly calibrating your stringing machine to maintain accurate tension, investing in high quality stringing tools for better efficiency and string integrity, securely mounting the racket on the stringing machine to prevent any type of movement during stringing, but not so tight that it's going to keep the frame from being able to move a little bit while you're tensioning the strings. Using starting clamps to prevent slippage at the beginning of a stringing process. I always recommend that. Even if you've got secure clamps, I'll put it behind the clamp just in case there's a little bit of movement when you're first starting, because sometimes you might have gone from a 16 gauge to a 17 gauge and you didn't adjust the clamp at all, or something like that. So it's just always a good practice. And then the last one would be maintaining your stringing tools regularly to ensure the optimal performance. And so that's cleaning them at the end of every time. And then when you're first starting for the day, maybe wiping them down, making sure everything is working properly before you start stringing a racket, because then, you could potentially damage or create more work for yourself. So those are the 5 tips related to equipment and tools. Well, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.